Hello, welcome to Law Excellence. We are doing Kalam Mains Answer Writing Program, where we take up previous year mains questions and try to attempt an answer. So, this is the fourth day in this week and the last day for Indian society. From tomorrow, there will be ethics. There will be case studies on ethics. So, today's question is the last question under the third season of Kalam Program for Indian society. So with this question in Kalam season 3 Indian society will come to a close. So over the last few days we discussed a range of questions related to society. We discussed joint family, poverty and migration, labor trends in migration, and today we take up another broad theme, that is globalization. So let us quickly see what is the question and try to see what can be a good model answer for this question. So the question is, to what extent globalization has influenced the core of cultural diversity in India? Explain. So this is the typical question in society. So many students have problem in writing answer to questions like this. They are used to a question in polity or a question in economy, S&T, where you explain pros, introduction, pros, cons, way forward or government schemes. But in society and even in history, some idea, some concept will be given and we will be asked to elaborate or explain that concept. So instead of just giving information, the answer writing method for society must be of explaining, must be of explanatory style. So this question is similar. So the question is about globalization. What are the keywords? The keywords are globalization and cultural diversity. So this question is asking us to explain the impact of globalization on the cultural diversity in India, and this must be explained once again through various examples and through a broad conceptual framework. Let us first see what is the way in which we have to write this, or what is the nature of globalization, what is the nature of globalization's impact on Indian culture. Here you must keep in mind some key things. So you must keep in mind what has been the trend. So many feared when India was globalization, many anthropologists and sociologists feared that globalization is a dangerous phenomena in terms of its cultural impact. It will lead to cultural homogenization, that is, the Western or more specifically the American and to an extent the European culture will make inroads into the very remote parts of the world. And right now the world has multiple cultures. Each region, each sub-region has its culture, but it was feared that once the world globalizes, the culture of the powerful societies will spread throughout the world and it will displace and replace the various local cultures. These are the local cultures. It was believed it will displace the local cultures, leading to one homogeneous culture. And cultural homogenization is a dangerous trend. It's a dangerous trend. Why is it dangerous? It is dangerous because underlying the cultural diversity, within cultural diversity is good. Diversity is good because if underlying the diversity there is indigenous knowledge. Hidden in this cultural diversity are the enormous amounts of knowledge. So if the world has diversity, then in a time of crisis like right now in Corona, in a time of crisis, we can see which culture offers the best way of life or which cultures offers the best solution, and we can pick that up to solve the problem. But if the world has just one culture, then we lose the knowledge. We lose the knowledge that is hidden in the culture. So we lose the knowledge that is hidden behind the culture. Hence, cultural diversity is a good thing for humanity. So it was believed that when globalization happens, rapid globalization, especially after the Second World War, it was believed that this rapid globalization would only eventually lead to cultural homogenization. Now, we must examine if this has really happened or to what extent has this happened, and if this is not true, then what has been the nature of the globalization's impact on Indian culture. So this is the broad theme that we have to take to answer this question. Now let us see how an answer can be written for this. So this is one answer that we have. Let us see. So the first, what is the introduction? In the introduction, okay, globalization has been defined. But instead of defining is one good way of doing this, but this question is not about what is globalization. The question is globalization and cultural diversity. So it would have been better if the question discussed the specific issue of globalization and cultural diversity. That is, the question could have talked about how it could have just discussed the very idea we had in the discussion, that globalization has rapidly changed culture and it was feared by many that this will lead to cultural homogenization, but in reality this has not been so. That could have been a better introduction rather than defining. So please, these are the various techniques we must follow to write an introduction. One is a definition style. Take a keyword and define it. The second, or a more better way of writing introduction, is to take the question and give a theme in the introduction, provide a theme or provide an insight of the direction in which your answer is going to be written. That can be a better way of writing introduction. Second style will lead to a better introduction than first style. The second style will lead to a better introduction. So now this is the introduction. Let's see. Global homogenization. See, the student has attempted to describe this idea, but now without describing that idea, by just defining globalization, if you now jump to global homogenization, then there is no connection. So what is the issue here? From introduction to the next subheading, there is no organic flow. It does not feel connected. So that's why instead of just defining, it would have been better if an insight or theme that we discussed in the previous slide was written. Then there would have been an organic flow between introduction and the subsequent ideas. So here, student is trying to explain how globalization has led to some sort of homogenization. So this is not global homogenization, this is cultural homogenization. How this has led to cultural homogenization. The first point is Mcdonaldization. Very good. This is a good point. I like this. So Mcdonaldization is an idea proposed by an eminent sociologist called George Ritzer. George Ritzer is an eminent sociologist who follows the ideas of Max Weber. So George Ritzer gave this idea of Mcdonaldization. What is Mcdonaldization? It is one concept which describes this process of cultural homogenization. George Ritzer is saying in the era of rapid globalization, everywhere across the world, this McDonald's type of fast food culture is taking shape. Mcdonaldization means some sort of fast food culture. So across the world, everywhere, this fast food culture is taking pace by following the West. So in the West, we have Mcdonaldization. Fast food culture means not just eating fast food, but it means fast pace of life, wanting things to happen quickly, doing many things, being consumerist. So it means a lot. So this McDonaldization is typically referring to the American way of life, American culture. Quick, fast, doing many things, consuming a lot, and looking at life as a big mechanism to consume things. So George Ritzer said this societies after being globalized and after coming into contact with the global trade, after opening up, they are increasingly McDonaldization. They are increasingly becoming McDonaldized. That is, they are the spread of McDonald's stores across the world, George Ritzer claims, is an example of the spread of American culture itself, American fast food culture. So he described this process as McDonaldization, where people increasingly become dehumanized, disconnected. They are increasingly focusing on rationality and reason, and emotion and other things are sidelined. So this trend, George Ritzer said, is McDonaldization, and this is spreading throughout the world. So this is a good point. Next, most powerful point. Next, yes, how is this global cultural homogenization happening? We see English language is spreading everywhere. We are also, yes, this is good, family system. How family system is changing. We are now across the world various diverse ways of family system, and anthropologists study many diverse family systems. All these diverse family systems are breaking down, and we seeing increasingly new ways of family. We discussed in joint family, right? Live-in relationships, nuclear family, high divorce rates. All these are something that we see in Western society, more particularly American society, and that has become the direction in which the other societies are also shifting. And yes, consumerism, increasing consumerism. This, yes, very good. Walmartization. This is another word used to describe consumerism, where people are just consuming meaninglessly. They are shopping because they are bored. They are working hard just so that they can buy new things, and they start accumulating so many things over a period of life that they do not need. So in this, they are stuck in the cycle of earning, consuming, and then once again earning. Since you earn to consume, and through consumerism you increase your needs, desires and material desires, and to meet them you have to once again do the work you don't like. So they are stuck in this vicious cycle of working just because they have to consume. This is called as Walmartization. This is also becoming the increasing trend across many societies. Many Eastern societies, many Asian, African societies have a non-material outlook to life. Now increasingly this is being replaced by this consumerist outlook. Next, yes, what are the other aspects in which this global cultural homogenization is taking up? Yes, corporate culture, the work style is one example. Globalization of, okay, this is also good. So fundamentalism and terrorism, they are also globalizing. So for example, ISIS, it is one radical group in Iraq, but it used the forces of globalization to spread its culture of terror throughout the world. So ISIS got recruits from Canada, Australia, London, Paris, Germany, so on. So this is through using globalization to radicalize youth and spread a culture of terror. So while globalization can homogenize in a positive way, it can also homogenize in a negative way. This is another example. But what are some significant omissions? Significant omissions are how globalization is playing out in media, how is it playing out in education. For example, many Asian and African societies used to have traditional systems of education, traditional methods of learning and traditional systems of education. Today, everywhere, the Western model of education has replaced the traditional systems. We all think in terms of physics, maths, chemistry. We all think in terms of CGPAs in college, grade system, engineering, medicine, and examination system. So all this is Western model of education, university, college system. So all of this is nothing but an example of globalization, cultural homogenization in the educational sphere. The indigenous knowledge has been disappearing and indigenous methods of learning have also started slowly receding to the backseat. Likewise in the media. So this whole news hour, news 24/7 news style is nothing but a Western concept, isn't it? The BBC or a debate, this sensationalism in media, all of this commercialization of media, all of this is a Western idea. In India, we used to only have state broadcasters like BBC or Prasar Bharati, but now we are increasingly seeing an ambush of news and overdose of news, and we are in a position where we are consuming so much meaningless news, so much low quality news, and that is once again thanks to globalization. So that is good. Next, the next idea is globalization. This is very good. This is what I've been looking for. So globalization is another very good trend. What is globalization? Globalization is a concept which says that whenever the global comes to local, it does not displace the local, rather both interact and they create a synthesis. The synthesis is global culture, globalization. So globalization means, so some believe that when globalization enters local society, it will remove the local, but globalization tells that when globalization enters, it will not remove the local, but both will learn to coexist and live together. Globalization will be modified by the local people according to their style. And the best example is McDonald's. So for example, when McDonald's came to India, while they also sell French fries, what do you see them selling? They also sell things like Aloo Tikki, Veg Pulao. Do you see this menu of McDonald's in the US? No. So whenever these global ideas have come to India, Indians, for example, have not blindly copied this global traditions. They have tried to tune it to their local needs. Things like jeans. In Western, jeans is one way, but in India, Indian women wear jeans along with traditional wear like kurti. So this is how whenever a Western idea enters a culture, that Western idea does not displace the local things, rather both interact and some kind of via media, some kind of fusion is arrived. So this figure is a very good way of depicting this, that global and local interact. They do not, this interaction is not unidirectional. It is not that only global will influence the local, but the local also influences the global and it may result in some kind of fusion. For example, from global, India learnt things like pop music, Hollywood. But from India, what have we given to the world? We are trying to give yoga, we are trying to give our spirituality, our cultural activities. So this is how this interaction is two-way. It should not be considered as one way. This means that the first point we made, that globalization is not leading to cultural homogenization because of this reason, that both interact and this creates some kind of cultural potpourri, some kind of new cultural diversity is being created. So it is not that there was cultural diversity and it is slowly becoming cultural homogenization. No, instead there was cultural diversity. This cultural diversity is giving way to new forms of cultural diversity. There was old forms of cultural diversity. These old forms are increasingly giving way to new forms of cultural diversity, and this new culture is what we call as global culture. This is the idea this point takes, and these are all examples to explain this. English, for example, is an example of globalization. Hindi plus English. Next, how we are using internet for religious purposes, online darshan. So this is once again local culture using global culture to create global. Celebrating New Year with traditional festivals, remix or fusion music. For example, we have Punjabi pop music. That is nothing but using the Western ideas to create a local culture. And another idea, the next idea is revival of local culture. So while some have become homogenized, some areas of culture have become global, some areas of culture are stiffly resisting globalization, or rather they are reviving themselves, they are not changing. What are these? For example, Yoga Day. This is an example of reviving our old cultural practices in the name of using the new aspects. Take ISKCON for example. ISKCON or Isha Foundation or Messages of Spirituality and Meditation. These are all neo-religious movements. All of these are making a comeback in the face of globalization. For example, why is Isha Foundation and Sadhguru very popular today? Because of the cultural changes that have been caused by globalization. Many people find these cultural changes totally unacceptable or discomfortable. So they respond to this discomfort by going back to what was their past culture. So things like Sri Sri or Art of Living, Isha Foundation, ISKCON, all these are people going back to the past, trying to revive the past because they feel that in the present a new culture is making inroads and this new culture is not good. So that is how various things are happening. And next, yes, this is also another example how, for example, even in this global era, there is still demand for some native products, and these native products try to gain protection through GI. Things like Bobbili Veena or Basmati rice or Venkatagiri saris, Pochampalli saris. So while there is globalization, it does not mean that the indigenous culture has become totally irrelevant. Despite globalization, in fact, the indigenous varieties, if properly branded, they can have more demand. So despite globalization, people still want to have access to the ethnic foods, ethnic wear, ethnic aspects, ethnic goods like traditional medicine, traditional food, traditional clothes, traditional arts. So that is also there. So that is why even today many educated people want to buy some folk goods, folk artists like Bobbili Veena, or they were interested in buying hand woven saris of weavers. So this interest is also there. Now this interaction has created some friction in Indian society. So yes, we are talking about this. Now lastly, we discussed the various aspects of this interaction between globalization and local cultures. We discussed the various aspects, homogenization, globalization, and we also discussed the issue of cultural revivalism. Along with that, there is also some friction. Now, we discussed the aspects of this interaction, but is this interaction creating any conflicts in Indian society? Is this creating any friction in Indian society? It is indeed creating some friction. What is that? For example, you take Valentine's Day. Now Valentine's Day is a global tradition. So when young couples celebrate Valentine's Day, we frequently see some right-wing groups taking up the role of vigilantes, and they try to get those young couple married publicly, forcibly. So what is that? That is nothing but clash between two kinds of cultural thinking. One, the young couple who are getting influenced by Western ideas. Then there are the right-wing groups who prescribe to the past or who prescribe to the ancient Indian culture. Now, sometimes both of them can have very friendly interaction, but sometimes both of them can be in opposition to one another, leading to conflicts. So this is an example of that. When right-wing groups, they downplay the advantages and build a narrative of cultural nationalism. So this is nothing but some kind of clash between the globalizing trend and the ancient or past Indian culture. Then the other aspects of this interaction are, yes, while it can lead to individualism and loneliness. For example, under the influence of globalization, we see increasing instability in marriages and rise of divorces. This creates loneliness and creates some sort of complex psychological problems in Indian adults. At the same time, youth, for example, also have some kind of inferior complex. They'll start looking at the local culture as inferior and begin to blindly ape the Western culture. This is the other danger. You can also try a fourth point, that is the impact on women. For example, in many places, rape can be seen as an example of this trend. The conflict between two different cultural groups, one changing rapidly in the face of westernization, globalization, another not changing rapidly but sticking to the ancient roots. So women, for example, are changing rapidly. They are becoming more open, their pattern of dress is changing, they are taking up work, the way in which they are looking at sex, they are claiming rights over their sexuality. All this is changing. But men are slow to change, and this can create some confusing aspects in society. So, if a woman dresses in a particular way, a man who has also changed and thinks like that woman can look at it take it easily. But another person who comes from a rural area, person who does not believe in these global values can look at that modern dressing and perceive that in a wrong way. He can perceive that as preparedness for sex, or he can perceive that as a woman who is not of rightful character. So this can lead to rape. For example, the Nirbhaya rape in 2012. Just because a girl was out in the night in Delhi with another male friend, and because they had gone to some movie together, these people who raped that woman brutally felt that this woman is of loose character, and they took that as an opportunity to teach her a lesson and did this brutal incident. So this kind of issues are also an outcome of this cultural conflict. Now we can conclude by saying that yes, globalization is impacting local culture, no doubt, but the local culture is also resistant. The globalization is not replacing local culture. Instead, it is resulting in a cultural synthesis which maintains the Indianness while also taking up some positive aspects of local culture. That is to say that this whole direction of globalization and cultural impact is not one way but two way, and Indian culture is not blindly copying the West, but some kind of coexistence, some kind of synthesis is being done, which is creating a new diverse cultural ethos in India. So the diversity is still there, but yes, it may have reduced compared to the past, but the diversity is still there in Indian culture. This is because the Indian civilization has a long history of 2000 years. Please, this is very important. Our culture has a history of 2000 years. Now, this Western culture is probably only 300 years old at the maximum. Now, this is why this culture is rooted in all our consciousness. So, something that comes from outside and is relatively young compared to the Indian culture cannot have the strength to totally displace it. Please keep this point in mind. So, ancient societies like Indian, Chinese and the Egyptian societies, they have long histories of cultural evolution, and it is not easy to displace this. With that, we come to a close. We close the society part of Kalam program for season 3, and tomorrow in the next video there will be a discussion on ethics. So please take this case study. This is the case study for ethics that is to be discussed tomorrow. So please take note of this and try to attempt an answer, and this will be discussed in the next video. So please pay attention to this question and attempt an answer. With that, we close this session. Thank you. Goodbye.